Today we're going to learn about the overlocker and how to use it safely. Now the overlocker is just like a normal machine, as it has a presser foot with a lever at the back for it to go up and down. It also has a hand wheel at the side to make the needles go up and down, but it is also very different. For one, it has 4 threads. It has a cutting blade, which is here, and it is a lot more complicated. So you guys won't ever have to worry about threading up an overlocker. As you can see here, quite complex. So for us today, we're going to look at just regular straight overlocking and curves. So to begin with, you'll need a scrap of fabric with a nice straight edge to start practicing. Now when we overlock, we have to line up the straight edge of our fabric with this first line here. If we don't line it up with that line, it won't finish the edge neatly, or it will cut a lot of our fabric off, which isn't ideal. Now as you can see, what I did just there is I just lifted up the presser foot with my hand rather than using the lever at the back. Now keeping the edge of my fabric lined up with that line, I can overlock that edge. Now the overlocker does go quite fast, and it does have a blade that will cut your fabric if you're not careful. Now you can use it to neaten. So if you saw, my fabric had a slight curve, it wasn't quite cut 100% straight. So I used it to just neaten that little bit. Now when you're overlocking, you don't grip the fabric, you let it go at its speed. Okay, so you just guide it. And the whole time you're watching here. So one, is it lined up with that line? Or is it lined up with the blade here, which goes up and down? That's the blade, that part there. And the difference with overlocking is when you finish and get to the end, you have to keep overlocking. Okay, you need a long tail to finish. Otherwise the overlocker can become unthreaded, and it can take quite a long time to thread it up because there are 4 different threads and it's quite complicated. You also have a thread cutter, just like your machine, and that's a really good guide to give you the right length of thread. Looking at my overlocking, I can see that it is nice and neat. It's not loopy, and I didn't cut off too much or anything. There's nothing in the little scrap bin here. So that's perfect. Now let's have a look at what could happen if you didn't do it properly. So if you're gripping it, instead of letting it go at the speed it wants to go, you'll see what will happen. So if you grip your material as it goes through the overlocker, your stitches will be really close together, and that will be really obvious to look at once you finish. Another thing you might forget to do is to put down the presser foot. So let's have a look what's going to happen if you don't put down your presser foot. As you can see, it doesn't really want to sew, and we'll have a look at what it's done. So if you forget to put down the presser foot, you're going to get a real loopy, messy finish. So make sure you remember to put down the presser foot. That is why I often just lift the front up, because that way I don't have to remember have I put the foot down or not, because it's actually already down. Another mistake you might make is you may lose control and cut your fabric. So if you're not really paying attention and keeping your fabric lined up with that line or up against the cutting blade, you could cut some of your fabric quite easily. So as you can see, I've cut a section of that fabric. So that's made my seam allowance if I was doing it on my garment, a lot shorter than it should be. And it's also given it like a curved finish, which isn't ideal. I've got a straight cut. The overlocking should be straight, like the first side I did. So some pointers with overlocking: just lift up the front of the foot, line up your raw edge of your fabric with the line here, or with the cutting blade. Those two actually line up with each other, so either of those would work. And finally, always leave a long tail. If you do unthread the machine, it can take up to 20 minutes to rethread it, so it is very inconvenient for me as the teacher.